In the busy city of Lagos lived a young woman named Adiz. She was only 22, full of hope and dreams. Every morning she worked at a small cafe, serving tea and bread to people rushing to their jobs. Though life was not easy, she always smiled. Her laughter made even tired customers feel lighter. She lived with her mother and younger brother in a small room, and together they made the best of what they had. One afternoon a black car stopped outside the cafe. From it stepped Chief Obinna, a man well known across Lagos. He was rich, powerful and much older, 68 years old. People said he owned half the city. Adiz had heard of him but never imagined he would ever notice her. Chief Obinna watched her quietly as she worked. Her smile was gentle, her words respectful. When she served him tea she said softly, "May your day be peaceful, sir." Those words stayed in his heart. He returned to the cafe again and again, always sitting at the same corner, always asking for her to serve him. Soon the old man began sending gifts, flowers, fine fabric, even a gold bracelet. Adiz was surprised and confused. She told her mother, who said, "Perhaps God has sent a blessing." But Adiz's heart was uncertain. She had never thought of marriage to an older man, especially one like Chief Obinna, who seemed distant and serious. One evening the chief came to their home with his driver and 3 elders. He spoke politely to Adiz's father. "Your daughter has a good heart," he said. "I wish to make her my wife." The family sat in silence. The offer was great. The chief was wealthy and respected, but the age difference was large. Adiz's father asked her softly, "My child, what do you say?" Adiz looked down. She saw her mother's hopeful eyes and her brother's bare feet. She thought of their struggles, their rent, and her long days at the cafe. Slowly she said, "If it is God's will, I will marry him." The news spread fast across the streets. People whispered everywhere. Some said she was lucky, others said she was foolish. Why would a young girl marry an old man? They asked. But no one dared speak it to the chief's face. The wedding was grand. Musicians played drums, dancers moved in bright colors, and food filled every table. Adiz wore a white gown and gold jewelry that shone in the sunlight. The chief smiled proudly beside her, shaking hands with guests who praised his choice. But inside, Adiz's heart was quiet. She tried to smile, but it felt strange. When she looked around, she saw faces full of curiosity, not joy. Even her friends seemed unsure how to celebrate. Still, she told herself to be strong. Maybe love will grow, she thought. That night, after all the laughter and dancing had ended, Adiz stood on the balcony of her new home. The mansion was huge, filled with light and silence. She could see the city far below, the noise of traffic faint in the distance. Chief Obinna joined her and placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You will live well here," he said in a calm voice. "Everything you want, you will have." Adiz smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. He looked at her then, his eyes deep and unreadable. There was something strange in them, a heaviness she could not understand. It was not anger, not sadness, but a kind of secret he carried inside. As he turned away and walked down the hall, Adiz felt a chill move through her heart. The house was beautiful, but it did not feel like home. The night air was warm, yet her hands felt cold. When she lay in the soft bed, she could not sleep. She thought of the cafe, of her old life, of the freedom she had lost. She wondered what kind of man her husband truly was. Everyone said he was kind and generous, but something about his silence frightened her. In the distance, she heard the slow ticking of a clock echoing through the wide house. Time felt heavy, stretching long into the dark. She whispered to herself, "Maybe love will grow. Maybe this is the start of something good." But deep down, a small voice inside her said something different. It said that Chief Obinna's world was not what it seemed, that behind his kind smile and gentle words were things better left unseen. Adiz closed her eyes and prayed. She did not know what the future would bring, but she felt it coming, quiet as a shadow, waiting beyond the golden walls of her new home. And as the night deepened, the lights in the mansion flickered softly, as if even they knew that peace in this place was only a dream waiting to break. Adiz moved into Chief Obinna's grand mansion, a place so large that her footsteps echoed through the halls. The house stood on a hill outside Lagos, surrounded by tall iron gates and wide gardens. From the outside, it looked like a dream, shining windows, marble floors, golden lamps, and servants dressed in white. But from the first day, Adiz felt something she couldn't explain, a strange silence beneath all the beauty. The servants were polite, but their smiles were forced. They rarely spoke unless spoken to. When she asked about the rooms or the house, they would lower their heads and say softly, "Madam, Chief doesn't like questions." Every morning, Chief Obinna left early for his business. He wore fine suits, drove expensive cars and was always surrounded by guards. Adiz watched him from the balcony as he left, waving gently though he rarely waved back. When the gate closed behind him, the house became too quiet, so quiet that even the ticking of the clock sounded loud. She tried to fill her days by exploring. The mansion had long corridors, paintings of people she did not know, and locked doors she was told never to open. One room in particular caught her attention. It was on the east side of the house, always locked, with a golden handle and a strange mark on the door. Every time she walked past it, she felt something heavy in her chest, as if the room itself was watching her. At night the house changed. The air grew cold and sometimes Adiz heard footsteps in the hall when no one was there. Once she heard soft voices, women whispering, but when she opened the door the sound vanished. She told herself it was just her imagination, yet the fear would not leave her. One afternoon, while cleaning the library shelves, she found something strange, a small gold necklace tangled behind a book. It was delicate and beautiful, engraved with a name, Ngozi. Adiz frowned. She didn't know anyone by that name. When Chief Obinna came home that evening, she showed it to him and asked, "Whose necklace is this?" For a moment his face changed. His eyes went dark and his smile disappeared. Then he forced a laugh and said, "It's from the past. You don't need to worry about it." He took the necklace quickly and left the room without another word. That night, Adiz couldn't sleep. The image of the name Ngozi kept appearing in her mind. She wondered if Ngozi had once lived here too, maybe before her. Maybe she was one of the secrets this mansion held behind its locked doors. The next day, Adiz asked one of the older servants, Mama Tola, if she knew the name. The old woman froze and whispered, "Madam, please don't ask. Some names are not meant to be spoken in this house." Then she turned and walked away before Adiz could ask more. From that day, Adiz began noticing other small things. A silk scarf left in a drawer, a woman's shoe behind the curtains, a faint smell of perfume in a room that hadn't been used for months. Each clue made her heart beat faster. It was as if ghosts of other lives still lingered in the house, whispering through the walls. When she tried to talk to Chief Obinna about it again, he only smiled coldly. "You're imagining things," he said. "This house is yours now. Forget the past." But she couldn't forget. The silence felt heavier and the air in the mansion seemed colder. She began to notice that Chief sometimes left at night and didn't return until morning. The guards never said where he went. Once, when she heard footsteps again, Adiz followed the sound through the hallway. It led her near the locked room. The door shook slightly as if someone inside had just moved. Her heart pounded. She reached out to touch the handle, but before she could, a servant appeared suddenly and whispered, "Madam, please don't." She stepped back quickly. The servant's face looked pale, almost frightened. That night, Adiz sat by her window looking at the city lights far below. The mansion was full of gold and glass, but it felt like a cage. Every door led her deeper into a mystery she didn't understand. She missed her small home, the smell of coffee at the cafe and the laughter of her friends. She thought of her wedding day, of how everyone had envied her. "She married a rich man, she will live like a queen," they had said. But sitting alone in that cold, silent house, she realized that wealth without peace was only another kind of prison. When the wind blew that night, she heard it again, soft voices almost like women crying. She pressed her hands to her ears and whispered, "Maybe I'm only dreaming." But deep in her heart, Adiz knew something was wrong in that house. Something was hiding behind those golden walls, something that Chief Obinna did not want her to find. And as the moonlight fell across the locked door once more, the faint sound of a woman's whisper drifted through the air, calling a name that made Adiz's blood run cold. The rain fell heavily that morning, tapping softly on the mansion windows like fingers trying to speak. Adiz sat alone in the study feeling restless. Chief Obinna had traveled for business, leaving her with only the servants and her thoughts. The air felt thick, the house unusually quiet. She decided to clean and distract herself, hoping to chase away the unease that had settled in her heart. As she wiped the shelves and moved old boxes from under the table, her hand brushed against a loose wooden panel. Curious, she pulled at it, and to her surprise it slid open easily. Inside was a small box covered with dust and tied with a faded red ribbon. Something about it felt important. She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly, then untied the ribbon. Inside were stacks of letters, neatly folded and carefully kept. The paper was yellowed with age, but each letter began the same way, "My husband, though you keep me in silence." Adiz's breath caught. The handwriting was different on each letter, written by 5 different women. At the bottom of each note was a name: Ngozi, Chika, Bimp, Ifyananya, and Saad. 5 women. 5 wives. Her heart pounded in her chest. The words blurred before her eyes as she read line after line. The letters spoke of loneliness, of secrets, and of pain. One wrote about being locked away from the world. Another begged for love. A third spoke of leaving in fear. One letter ended with words that sent chills down Adi's spine. If I disappear, tell the next to look behind the golden door. Adiz dropped the letter, her hands shaking. The golden door, the one she had always wondered about, the one Chief Obinna had forbidden her to touch. Her mind raced. Could these women have lived here before her? Were they gone, or worse? The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling across the sky. She gathered the letters and ran to the servants' quarters. There she found the oldest maid, Mama Neka, sitting by the fire. Adiz held the box close and whispered, "Mama, please tell me the truth. Who were these women?" Mama Neka looked at the letters and froze. Her eyes filled with fear and she whispered, "Madam, where did you find this?" "In the study," Adiz said quietly. "Who are they, Mama? Tell me." The old woman sighed deeply and looked around to make sure no one was listening. "They were all his wives," she said in a trembling voice. "Chief married them in secret, one after another. He said he loved them, but none stayed long. Some left quietly. Others disappeared. No one dared ask questions." Adiz's knees grew weak. "Disappeared? How?" she whispered. Mama Neka shook her head slowly. "I do not know, child. But strange things happened in this house after each one vanished. I prayed for their souls." She looked at Adiz with sadness in her eyes. "You are the 6th wife, madam, and you must be careful." The fire cracked in the silence that followed. Adiz sat still, holding the box tightly, her thoughts spinning like the storm outside. She remembered the whispers in the hallways, the perfume that lingered in empty rooms, the locked golden door, and Chief Obinna's cold, distant eyes. That night she couldn't sleep. The rain beat against the windows and every shadow seemed alive. She kept the letters close beside her bed as if they might protect her. At times she thought she heard footsteps again, moving just beyond her door. She wanted to believe it was only her fear, but deep down she knew better. Near midnight, lightning flashed across the sky, and Adiz sat up suddenly. In that brief light she saw something, a reflection in the mirror. A woman's shape standing near the window, her face pale and eyes sad. Adiz blinked and the figure was gone. She ran to the window and looked out, but there was nothing there, only rain pouring down on the empty garden. Still, she felt a presence, a quiet sorrow that filled the room. The letters lay open on the table, the ink smudged by her trembling hands. One line caught her eye again: "If I disappear, tell the next to look behind the golden door." Adiz turned her gaze toward the east wing of the mansion. She could almost see the outline of that forbidden door in her mind, the golden handle gleaming faintly in the dark. Something inside her whispered that the truth she feared was waiting behind it. But she wasn't ready, not yet. That night, she stayed awake until morning, clutching the letters to her chest, her heart breaking for the women who came before her. The mansion, once grand and beautiful, now felt like a tomb filled with the voices of the forgotten. When the sun finally rose, Adiz sat by the window, her eyes tired but determined. She had learned the truth, or at least part of it. But one question burned in her heart, stronger than fear. What really happened to the 5 wives of Chief Obinna? The next morning the mansion felt colder than ever. Adiz had not slept. The box of letters still lay open on the table, the words of those forgotten women echoing in her mind. Chief Obinna returned from his business trip just after sunrise, dressed in his fine white suit and golden watch, walking with the confidence of a man who owned the world. When he saw Adiz sitting in the living room, her face pale and her eyes swollen from tears, he stopped. "What is wrong, my wife?" he asked softly, though his voice carried no real concern. Adiz stood slowly and held up one of the letters. "You never told me," she said. Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. "You never told me about them." Chief Obinna's eyes narrowed slightly. He looked at the paper and sighed. "You should not have found that," he said. "The past is gone. Forget it." "Gone?" Adiz whispered. "Gone like the women who wrote these? Gone like Ngozi, like Chika, like all the others who disappeared?" His face hardened. "You have no right to question me," he said quietly. "I gave you everything, a name, a home, riches." She shook her head. "You gave me walls, not love. You gave me fear, not peace. Why hide the truth, Chief? Why lie?" He looked away for a long moment, then said, "Because truth makes people leave. The words hung in the air like smoke. Adiz stared at him, realizing that behind all his pride and power, he was still a man ruled by fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being left alone, fear of love that could not be bought. "Love can't grow in darkness," she said softly. He turned to her, eyes cold. "You speak like a child. The world is not made of light. It is made of strength, power, and silence." She looked at him sadly. "Maybe that is why you have everything and yet nothing." Chief Obinna did not answer. He walked past her and poured himself a drink, pretending to be calm. But she could see his hand trembling. He had built his empire on secrets, and now one truth had shaken him more than any storm. Adiz walked to her room quietly. She opened her wardrobe and took out her small bag. There wasn't much to pack: a few dresses, a scarf, and the box of letters. She looked around the golden room one last time, remembering the day she had first entered it as a bride full of hope. Back then she had believed she was walking into a life of comfort and love. Now she knew she had only walked into another kind of prison. As she left the room, Mama Neka appeared at the hallway corner. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "You are leaving, madam?" she whispered. Adiz nodded. "Yes, Mama. I can't stay in a house built on pain." Mama Neka held her hand tightly. "Go, my child," she said softly. "You have courage." The others didn't get the chance to walk away. Adiz smiled sadly, hugged her, and stepped outside. The morning sky was still gray from the rain, but the air smelled fresh, full of promise. She walked down the long marble path, past the fountain and the iron gates. For a moment she turned back and looked at the mansion, tall, grand, and empty. Chief Obinna stood on the balcony, watching her silently. She met his gaze one last time. There was no anger in her eyes, only pity. Without another word she turned and walked away. The road ahead was long and dusty, and her shoes grew wet from the puddles left by the storm. She had no car, no driver, and no plan. But for the first time she felt light, as if a great weight had been lifted off her heart. The wind blew softly through the trees, carrying the scent of the city she once knew, the cafe where she used to work, the laughter of people living simple lives, the world outside the walls of gold. As she walked, the stars began to appear, one by one, shining gently above her. They seemed to whisper that she had done the right thing. She thought of the women whose names she had found: Ngozi, Chika, Bimp, Ifyananya, and Saad. She whispered their names into the night. "You are free now," she said. "And so am I." With every step, the mansion grew smaller behind her. The sound of the city grew louder, children laughing, music playing in the distance, the heartbeat of real life returning to her ears. She didn't know where she would sleep or what she would eat. But she knew this: she would rather be poor under the open sky than rich behind golden walls. As she reached the edge of the city, the wind brushed her face softly as if welcoming her home. She smiled faintly and whispered, "I'm free." And under the starlit sky, Adiz walked into a new beginning, poor again but finally at peace. Many years passed. The city of Lagos had changed, and so had Adiz. She no longer lived in fear or silence. Her hair had grown longer, her eyes calmer. She now ran a small school near the river, a school for girls who had little but dreams. Every morning, Adiz stood before her students under the mango tree and said, "Girls, don't let anyone buy your voice. Speak your truth even if it shakes the ground." The girls adored her. They called her Auntie Ada. They came from poor homes, some even walking miles to learn. Adiz taught them reading, writing, and sewing. But most of all she taught them courage. On the wall of her classroom she had painted a simple message in bright blue letters: "Truth is richer than gold." The words became her life's motto. Sometimes when the sun set and the air turned quiet, Adiz would sit outside, watching the river flow. She thought about her past, the grand mansion, the silk clothes, the golden dinners that never filled her heart. She would close her eyes and whisper, "I was once lost in gold, but I found myself in truth." Far away in that same mansion, Chief Obinna was now an old man. The walls that once shone with pride were covered in dust. His servants had left, his laughter was gone. People said he spent his evenings staring at an old photograph, the one from his wedding day. In it, Adiz stood beside him, smiling softly. Some said he spoke her name at night, whispering into the empty air. "Adiz, you were the only one who looked at me, not my money." He still had his cars, his lands, his bank accounts, but no warmth, no laughter, no love. The mansion echoed with silence. One afternoon a visitor came to Adiz's school, a man from the city who knew Chief Obinna. He said gently, "Madam, the chief is ill. He asks about you often." Adiz looked down, silent for a long time. Then she said, "May peace find him. That is all I wish." The man nodded and left. Later that day, Adiz stood before her students again. She told them, "When you grow up, don't look for rich husbands or fine clothes. Look for peace in your heart. If you lose gold, you can earn it again. But if you lose your truth, you lose yourself." The girls listened with shining eyes. Years went by and Adiz's school grew. More girls came. Some became teachers, some nurses, some mothers. They all carried her lessons with them: kindness, honesty, and freedom. In time, people began to tell her story across the land. They said, "There was once a girl who married a billionaire but found her real wealth not in his mansion, but in her own courage." When reporters or visitors asked about her past, Adiz always smiled and said softly, "I once married wealth, but I found real riches in freedom." Her words touched many hearts. Women who had suffered in silence began to speak up. Men who had lived in pride began to change their ways. Even in the city, some said that Chief Obinna finally learned too late that love cannot be bought. Before he died, he had written a note. "To Adiz, you were right. Truth lasts longer than gold." No one knew if she ever saw that letter. But perhaps, somewhere in her heart, she already knew. On the day of her school's 10th anniversary, the whole village gathered to celebrate. Children danced, drums played, and the air was full of joy. Adiz sat in front, her smile gentle but strong. A young girl handed her a small gift, a clay necklace with the words carved on it, "Truth is richer than gold." Adiz touched it and said, "Never forget this, my child. This is the greatest treasure anyone can own." As the sun went down, she looked at the bright faces around her, the laughter, the hope, the life. She realized she had found everything she once dreamed of: peace, purpose, and love that didn't need gold to shine. And so, her story lived on. People in Lagos and beyond told it for years. The story of Adiz, the young woman who married a billionaire, left his mansion, and built a school that changed lives. They said she taught the world a truth that no storm could erase. Gold fades. Power ends. But truth shines forever.